Well, Prigozhin is a complex figure. Certain things need to be understood up front about him and Wagner. First, Americans need to understand that the Wagner Group is really very analogous to the French Foreign Legion. If you're looking for an entity in the history of the French Republic that has fought harder than anyone else for France in both world wars and between the wars all over the world, it's the French Foreign Legion. I would say that you could say the same thing about the Wagner Group. Whatever their origins, and they're certainly a creature to some extent of Russian intelligence for use overseas, but they have fought in this war tirelessly to advance the Russian cause, and they've taken the casualties to prove it. So they are enormously popular with the Russian people. The Russian people love Wagner, and the Russian people overwhelmingly like Prigozhin. Prigozhin's kind of an unattractive character to us in the West. He's very foul. He makes outrageous statements. He exaggerates, and he has exaggerated his own importance on more than one occasion. He is not a professional soldier, but he is seen as a voice that the Russian people strongly support because of his ferocious determination to fight and win this war. And I think it has to be understood that the Russian people, large numbers of people in the Russian military establishment, are very frustrated with Putin's exercise of considerable restraint. We in the West don't seem to understand that Putin has moved very cautiously and deliberately throughout this war. He doesn't want to provoke NATO intervention. He wants to avoid a war with the United States. And as a result, each of the gains that the Russians have made have been quite limited and incremental. And people are fed up with it. You've got a number of senior officers in the Russian military who don't like it. So when you look at the problems that Prigozhin has had with the Russian high command, he's been angry because he said he didn't get enough ammunition, angry because he didn't think his soldiers were being adequately supported. Eventually, Putin intervened. General Surovikin was told, look, you've got to manage this. They're very good troops. Make sure he gets what he needs. And Surovikin is very sympathetic to Prigozhin and his larger views, I think. But Prigozhin decided it wasn't working and it wasn't enough. And I also think he knows he's not a professional soldier, so his ability beyond speaking publicly is limited. And I think he decided, I've got to get President Putin's attention. He needs to understand that the senior ranks need to be shaken up, that we need people with fire in the belly who want to go forward and crush the Ukrainians and be done with it. And so I think he went down to Rostov, where, of course, there was no fighting. If you look at the shots that were made of his discussion in the garden with the deputy chief of staff of the Russian general staff, they were very amicable. And I think these few troops that he sent towards Moscow were not headed there to displace Putin at all. They were there to try and get his attention, deliver the message that we want to fight. We want to end this war. And we want better leadership from the military, not from President Putin. Well, this whole thing got out of control. It looked like something it wasn't. The West celebrated, thinking, oh, finally, somebody's standing up to the evil Putin. It's a lot of nonsense. They're all very supportive of President Putin. And when it became clear what had happened, Lukashenko, who has known Prigozhin for at least 20 years, talked to President Putin, who also knows Prigozhin. He understands what we've discussed. President Putin was furious. He mobilized 30,000 troops in Moscow. He was ready to go down and crush all of this. When the Russian troops that had gone up there from Wagner, or the Wagner Foreign Legion, if you will, put its arms down immediately because they didn't want to kill Russians. The Russians don't want to kill them. So it all kind of fizzled quickly, as most of us thought that it would. But this is not somebody that you simply stand up against the wall and shoot. This is someone who is popular in Russia. He expresses a point of view that's not necessarily anti-Putin at all, but is very definitely sympathetic to the larger cause of let's end this war and get rid of these fascists that are sitting in Kiev. And so you're not going to shoot him. Lukashenko says, look, let me bring him up to Belarus. I'll keep him under wraps till this thing is over. And I think that's effectively what's happened. Everybody has effectively been pardoned. Nobody's going back to prison. Nobody's going to be executed at this stage. Now, I do think that the Wagner Group will see some of its forces broken up, not disbanded, but in smaller bites, 5,000, 4,000 troops moved into other areas in the future. And remember that this insistence by Prigozhin that they had been attacked by Russian forces was entirely nonsense. It was totally wrong. It never happened. That was his pretext to get people to react the way they did. So it's all over. But I do think that President Putin got the message. And I would look for some shakeups in the near future in the Russian high command. And I would be very surprised if we do not see an offensive begin soon. Because frankly, there's nothing out there to stand up to the Russian offensive. And remember, the Russians have never, ever unleashed the full might of their force.
Right.
This has been a limited war from the beginning because Putin wants to live with Ukrainians after this is over. He's not interested in killing large numbers of people. What he wants is neutrality for whatever remains of Ukraine. That's his goal. That's his overriding interest. So I think we're going to see some things change. I don't know what they'll be. I don't know who will go, who will stay. It won't happen all at once, but something will change up there. And then we'll see this offensive. And, just imagine you're a Russian soldier in one of these defensive positions. You've trained to fight. You've trained to attack. And you're saying, look, this is ridiculous. Look what we've done to these people. We've slaughtered them. Let's get this over with. I don't want to be here in another year. And I mean, I felt that way in 1991 when Colin Powell and others were saying, well, perhaps we should just go to a Korean-style frozen conflict, build a new DMZ between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Well, I was horrified. Large numbers of the generals thought, oh, well, this is good, then we don't have to fight. But the soldiers, we were furious. So let's get this over with, be done with it.
Результат нормальный. Всех взбодрили.